I walked up to the table and stood there. My wife's jaw dropped, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. It was the most unattractive I'd ever seen her look. Douglas started to rise, but I held up my hand and said, "No, Douglas, don't get up. As long as you're sitting, you're safe. But if you get up, I'll be forced to knock your teeth down your throat. So please stay seated. I'd hate to make a scene here." I paused, glancing at Julia, and continued, "I'm sorry to interrupt your moment, but I have to say this, Julia. I can't believe you faked being sick just to ditch a weekend with me and be with this piece of dog." I could barely hold back my disgust. There's no one I hate more than Douglas Simon, but to come here, to our special place, where we met, where I asked you to marry me, where we shared so many happy moments, that's something else. This place used to mean everything to me, but not anymore. And neither do you. I took a deep breath. On our wedding day, you promised me that you would never hurt me and that you'd never make me stop loving you. Well, I see two broken promises now. I'm hurt, terribly hurt, and my love for you is melting away like an ice cube in a cup of hot coffee. I looked at her, my voice growing sharper. You know me better than anyone, Julia. You know how I operate. I see the situation, analyze it, identify the problem, and find the solution. I've analyzed this one, and it's clear you want to date other men. Well, I won't allow that. I'm your husband, and I'm not the problem. If I am, my solution is simple. I'll remove the problem. I paused for a moment, staring at her. So I'm leaving. You're free to date any man you want. I hope he's worth it. I turned to leave, but then added, Douglas, this isn't over. I'll be seeing you around. I walked quickly to the exit and out onto the street, my mind racing. I crossed Michigan Avenue and turned the corner toward the lobby of the Drake Hotel. I stood there, hidden from view, watching as Julia rushed out the door and onto the sidewalk. She looked desperately around for me, but I wasn't there. After a few moments, her shoulders slumped, and she crossed the street to hail a taxi. She headed north, toward our condo. I was upset, no doubt about it. But a small part of me felt some consolation. At least I'd ruined her night with Douglas. And at least she seemed to care enough to leave him and head home, hoping to find me there. But she wouldn't. I stayed hidden, waiting a little longer to see what Douglas would do. It wasn't long before he came out, hailed a taxi, and left in the opposite direction. I decided to stay at the Drake for a few days to clear my head and figure out what to do with my life. I went inside and managed to get a room. You're probably wondering how we got to this point, so let me lay it out for you. My name is John Burton, and my wife's name is Julia. When I graduated from MIT, I landed a job as a software engineer with Grace System Solutions, a software development company in Chicago. The owner of the company, Greg Grace, was a decent boss, and I quickly moved up the ranks. I was doing well, and my career was on track. At the second company Christmas party, Greg introduced me to his goddaughter, Julia. She was the daughter of his best friend, and I suspect he invited them to the party just to set us up. I'm glad he did. Have you ever heard of love at first sight? Because that's exactly what happened. I thought Julia was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. She was witty, funny, and everything I could imagine wanting in a partner. I was smitten. It didn't take long for me to dominate the night, and honestly, I think she did the same to me. We hit it off instantly and never looked back. As I mentioned earlier, the party was at Spaga, and it became our special place. 3 months later, during another Saturday evening date at Spaga, I asked her to marry me. She jumped into my arms and said yes. We were married, and our lives only seemed to get better. My career flourished, hers did too, and we celebrated our successes together. We were married in 2010, and for a while everything seemed perfect. But about 6 months ago, I started to sense that the honeymoon was over. I know that's not supposed to last forever, but I really wanted it to. Something had changed, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The romance seemed to have diminished between us, though of course I couldn't be absolutely certain. It was just a feeling. So I decided to do something about it. I began planning a surprise getaway for the two of us. One of my best friends, Adam Hartley, worked in the software industry with his father, Ben. In fact, they were customers of Greg's company. I frequently made trips to their office in Cleveland, so I planned to coincide the getaway with one of those trips. Julia and I were supposed to meet Adam and Ben, along with their wives, Carolyn and Gloria, for dinner Friday night. Then we had a brief business meeting on Saturday morning before heading to Niagara Falls for a couple of days. Just the two of us. I hoped this would be the perfect chance to reconnect. But Julia didn't seem excited about the idea. She clearly wasn't eager to make the trip with me. She didn't know about the Niagara Falls surprise because I wanted it to be a romantic reveal to kickstart our second honeymoon. Despite that, she kept hesitating, and I had to push a bit to get her to agree. Friday morning came, and when I woke up, Julia wasn't in our bed. I found her in the spare bedroom, sleeping. I whispered, "Julia, are you awake?" She stirred slightly and responded, "John, I got sick last night. I didn't want to disturb you, so I came in here. I'm really sick and just need to sleep more. Can you call my office and tell them I won't be in today?" I did as she asked and went to work while leaving her to rest. Around 10 o'clock, I called to check on her. She said she was still sick. I responded, "Well, I guess I'll go to Cleveland alone then," but got no reply. So I hung up and immediately called Adam to let him know I'd be coming alone. We also discussed changing the plans. Adam suggested that, since Julia couldn't make it, they should cancel the Cleveland trip and come to Chicago instead. The two couples would meet me Friday night, and on Saturday they could shop on the Magnificent Mile. If Julia felt better, we could have dinner together. I loved the idea, so I made arrangements for them to stay at the Drake Hotel and reserved a table at Spaga for dinner at 6 p.m. I canceled my flight, the hotel in Cleveland, the car rental, and the hotel in Niagara Falls. It was disappointing, but what could I do? At 3 p.m., I called Julia again to check if she was feeling better and see if she'd join us for dinner. But I got a busy signal. I got distracted with work and forgot to call her back. Finally, at 5:30 p.m., I called again, but it went to voicemail. I left her a message with the updated plans and hurried out the door. I caught a taxi to Spaga to meet the Hartleys. We were enjoying cocktails when, out of nowhere, Adam looked uneasy. "John, I'm sorry, but this is going to upset you. Julia just walked in with another man. He's sitting behind you and to your left, against the wall." My heart sank. I slowly turned around, and there she was, sitting with another man. Couldn't believe it. And that man was none other than Douglas "Dog" Simon. I hated him, and I always would. He'd been engaged to my sister, Barbara, but left her standing at the altar. 2 days later, he showed up at her door to tell her he didn't want to get married. 3 weeks after that, we saw his marriage announcement to another woman in the paper, followed by a birth announcement 5 months later. Barbara was devastated, and although I believe she's better off without him, she's never fully recovered from the betrayal. Now, you understand why I call him that and why I hate him so much. But back to the present. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I was completely stunned. I tried to speak, but all I could do was stammer. I could see the shocked looks on everyone's faces, and I knew they felt sympathy for me. Finally, I managed to speak. "Well, isn't this something? Obviously, I can't continue this evening with you. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I didn't see what we all just saw. I suggest you enjoy the rest of your evening. Why don't we meet for breakfast tomorrow? Tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. in your hotel coffee shop, I said. I'm sure I'll be in better shape by then. Also, it's clear that Julia and I won't be joining you for dinner tomorrow night. I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. I hugged the ladies and both men who were, after all, longtime friends. Then I walked over to the table where Julia was sitting. I'm pretty sure Adam followed a few steps behind, just to make sure everything was okay. It wouldn't be, but I appreciated his concern for me. Now I'm back in my room at the Drake. I had turned off my cell phone while I was checking in, but I knew I needed to turn it back on. There were several messages from Julia. Like anyone in my position, I deleted them without listening. As I deleted the last voicemail, my phone rang again, but I let it go to voicemail. I didn't want to hear a thing she had to say. When it beeped with a new voicemail, I just deleted it and turned off my phone again. Saturday morning, I met with Adam and Ben to discuss our business relationship. I said, well, guys, I think there are going to be some significant changes in my life. I'm not sure what those changes will look like yet, but I'd like to ask you not to sign the new contract Greg sent you. Can you give me some time to sort things out with my marriage and my job? As you know, Greg is Julia's father's best friend and her godfather. If you can, there may be a better deal for you later. If not, I understand, but honestly, I don't see any harm in going month to month with Greg until I've figured things out. They both responded, John, we'll do as you ask. We're with Greg because of you. If your situation changes, we'll always be with you. Let us know what we need to do. We're here for you, however you need us. I was deeply moved and couldn't help but tear up. After another hug, the ladies walked into the restaurant, ready to drag their husbands off to spend their money. Adam's wife, Carolyn, smiled and said, come on, dear. Your credit card is cold, and I think it needs to be warmed up. Gloria, Ben's wife, chimed in, I hope Ben's cards are heat-resistant because we're going to swipe them so many times today that they just might melt. It's not every day we get to shop the Magnificent Mile. Despite everything I was going through, I had to chuckle. They were clearly trying to cheer me up while having fun with their husbands. Hugs all around, and off they went. I thought about going to the office to get a few things in order, but I figured Greg might be there on a Saturday, and maybe even Julia would show up, expecting me to be there. I decided to stay away and go in on Sunday morning instead to handle what I needed to. The rest of Saturday afternoon was spent reading a book. The next morning, I went into the office to tie up a few loose ends. I worked out a plan for what I needed to do on Monday and then returned to my hotel room with the Chicago Tribune. I started looking at apartment listings. I couldn't stay at the Drake for long, so I needed to find something else. After finding a few options, I made some calls and set up appointments for Tuesday morning. Once everything was scheduled, I decided to relax and watch some football. Monday morning, I went to see my attorney, Roger. He had been my lawyer since I first arrived in Chicago, and I asked him if he'd have any issue representing me in a divorce. He said, God, no, John. You can't really expect me to believe you're divorcing Julia. You love her like nobody I've ever seen. I replied, Roger, the key word here is love. It's past tense. I don't love her anymore. If you don't want to represent me, that's fine, but all I ask is that you don't represent Julia either. He agreed. I'd rather not represent either of you. I think you should try to work things out, but if you can't, I'd recommend Jacob Easterman. He'll do a good job for you. But please try to work things out. I thanked him for the referral, but I knew there was no going back. Roger, there's no way we're working it out. I just don't love her anymore. I met with Jacob Easterman, and he assured me that he could have all the paperwork ready by the end of the day Tuesday. Julia would be served on Wednesday. The next order of business was a visit to my bank. I got a cashier's check for half of our savings account. I left the rest of the money in our checking account, since there would still be bills to pay until the divorce was finalized. Julia and I had a specific arrangement with our finances. We each contributed a set amount each month to cover operating expenses. We also set aside a certain amount for meals, entertainment, and a fund for furnishings and other items. This account had grown significantly because we always put in more than we used. That's why I left it, so it could pay bills until the divorce was settled. We also each put about $500 per month into a savings account for vacations and holidays. I took 50% of that account. As for our individual earnings, we used them as we saw fit, investing as we wanted. My investment account and her investment account were completely separate, managed by different brokers. I didn't know the value of her account, and I doubted she knew the value of mine. The only thing we knew about each other's finances was the monthly deposit into checking and savings. I took my cashier's check to a local bank and opened new accounts. I deposited $25,000 in checking and $125,000 in savings. After taking care of a few other financial matters, insurance and such, I figured it was time to head into the office and get things settled there. As soon as I walked through the door, Kelly, the receptionist, told me, "Greg wants to see you in his office, immediately." I figured, here we go. When I knocked on his door, Greg called, "Come in, John. Close the door behind you." He was already on the phone, but I could tell from his tone that something was wrong. He hung up and said, "I got a call from Julia. What the hell is going on?" I explained everything, and he asked, "What are you going to do now?" "I'm going to divorce her," I replied. "What do you think?" Greg liked me, but he could be arrogant sometimes, and it came out right then. "Oh no, you're not, John. You're going to suck it up and work this out with your wife. There's no way you're going to divorce her and continue working here. Those are your choices. Work it out with Julia, or I fire you." I was stunned, at least I pretended to be. "Greg, are you telling me my work isn't valuable enough for you to overlook the fact that I'm divorcing Julia? Haven't I done a good job for you? Have I broken any company rules? Have I failed to follow company policy?" You might have guessed by now that I had my phone recording the whole conversation. "John, you do a great job for the company," Greg said. "You're as straight-laced as they come, and you always follow the rules. Hell, you helped write the company policy. I know you follow that, but Julia is my goddaughter. I'm telling you, unless you work it out with her, I'm firing you. Do you understand?" I knew he was just trying to pressure me, but I was ready to turn the tables on him. I didn't smile, but I wanted to. Instead, I said with a sad voice, "Then Greg, you're going to have to say the words, because I'm divorcing Julia." He looked surprised and disappointed. "John, you're fired." I asked him to have security escort me to my office so I could gather a few things. I had suspected this might happen, so I'd already packed a few things on Sunday. After all the years of working together, I knew Greg well enough. When I got to my office, well, I guess I should say my former office, there were only a few things I wanted. I packed them in a small box I had grabbed from the storage room. As I was about to leave, Greg said, "John, what about this picture?" It was a picture of Julia and me on our wedding day. She looked beautiful in her wedding gown, and I'll admit, I didn't look too shabby in my tuxedo either. A wave of sadness washed over me, and I felt tears well up in my eyes. "Oh, I always did love that frame," I said. I picked up the picture, took the back off, and dropped the photo in the trash. I placed the frame in my box of belongings. As I turned to walk out the door, there stood Julia. She looked shocked, and tears were streaming down her face. Obviously, she had seen me discard the wedding picture and felt the impact of what I had done. She asked, in a subdued voice, "Johnny, can we talk? Julia, you already cheated on me. How do you expect us to move forward? You broke both promises you made to me on our wedding day. You hurt me so badly that it broke my heart, and you did something that made me stop loving you. It's been said many times. You can't unbreak a heart. What's left? Do you really think I'll be able to get over you cheating on me? You know how much I hate Douglas after what he did to Barb, and you were cheating on me with him. Surely you can't expect that we can still make it as husband and wife. No, Julia, there's nothing else to talk about. With that, I continued walking out the door, out of my job and out of Julia's life. I called Adam Hartley and told him that Julia and I were divorcing, and that I had been fired from Grace Systems Solutions because of it. I explained that I was working on a new security system program, one that would be head and shoulders above what Grace was offering. But I needed a couple of months to get it ready for implementation. For the last 2 years, Greg hadn't allowed me to program as part of my job, preferring that I focus on system maintenance projects and customer relations. Because of that, I had been writing code on my own time and I was nearly finished. Had I not been fired, I would have pitched it to Greg after he saw the improvements over his current program. But now I was free to market it on my own. Adam said he'd have to check with his dad before giving a final answer, but I was confident they'd be willing to give me a few months to finalize the program. After that, they'd evaluate it and, depending on that, they could implement it. I moved out of the hotel within 4 days into a very nice apartment. The rent was high, but I had the reserves to make it work for a few months. After the move, I spent 10 to 12 hours a day writing and testing code. I knew I could have it ready for market soon, but I was driven to finish it and move on with my life. During this time, Julia was served with the divorce papers. She called me numerous times, wanting to talk things through. I listened to all of her voice messages, but there was nothing I felt needed to be said. She said, "Johnny, I admit I probably would have slept with Douglas if you hadn't stepped in, but I never did. I don't know what I was thinking, but I love you. Please call me." She said, "Johnny, I love you. I don't want a divorce. Please call me." Then, "Johnny, can't you find a way to forgive me and stay married to me?" And, "Johnny, I miss you." I was sick of it, so I called Jacob and asked him to contact Julia's attorney and tell him that I would be seeking a restraining order if she didn't stop. Soon after, I received a final message from Julia. "Johnny, I love you and want with all my heart to put an end to this and spend the rest of my life loving you. I can't believe you want a restraining order against me, but if you need to do it, go ahead. This will be my last message to you. I want you more than life itself, but the ball is now in your court. I'm sorry I hurt you so badly that you won't even talk to me. I love you, honey. Call me any time you want." True to her word, I didn't receive any further voicemails or texts. The effect wasn't quite what I expected. It really put a final stroke to our marriage, even if we weren't divorced yet. But it also made me incredibly sad. 3 weeks flew by as I worked on my program for hours each day. On Friday afternoon, shortly after lunch, I received a call from Jacob, informing me that we had a court hearing scheduled for the following Wednesday morning with Judge Janice Caldwell. He said it wasn't good news because she had a reputation for being totally against divorce and made everyone jump through hoops before ever granting one, if she granted it at all. When we arrived at the courtroom, Julia and her attorney were already there. Our case was called quickly. Once we were seated, the bailiff called the courtroom to order, "All rise." We did, and Judge Caldwell entered. She sat down and welcomed us. Turning to me, she asked, "As the petitioner in this divorce case, I'm asking if you would drop this action and go home and work on your marriage." I replied, "No, Your Honor. I want to continue with the action." I could tell trouble was coming when she gave me a disapproving look, but she said, "Okay." Then, she turned to Julia and asked, "Mrs. Burton, are you in agreement with this divorce action, or do you want to work on saving your marriage?" Julia didn't hesitate. "Your Honor, I absolutely do not want a divorce. I love my husband, and I want nothing more than to save my marriage." Judge Caldwell turned to me. "Mr. Burton, I've reviewed the petition carefully, and I see that you're filing on the basis of irreconcilable differences. I also note that your proposed settlement is extremely fair, and I see no indication of the usual vindictiveness from the typical petitioner. Do you have any explanation for that?" I took a deep breath. "Your Honor, I don't hate her. I don't want to hurt her, and I have no reason not to be fair in the settlement. I just don't want to be married to her anymore because I don't love her anymore." Julia gasped, a faint sob escaping her lips. The judge's expression remained unchanged, but I could tell she was considering her words carefully. "I think there's a real chance you two can work out your issues, given the proper opportunity. I'm going to order marriage counseling with a very qualified counselor. There will be 3 joint sessions. 1 initially, then 3 individual sessions for each of you, followed by 2 additional joint sessions. The only exception is if the counselor informs the court that there is no hope of saving this marriage." "So ordered." She struck her gavel, the sound echoing in the room. "Next case." I wanted to protest, but Jacob, who had been quietly standing beside me, held my arm. "John, just go to the first session. See if anything changes. If not, make it clear to the counselor that you want out, and see where it goes from there." Reluctantly, I agreed. The first counseling session was a disaster. Julia cried, apologized, and begged me to stop the divorce and work on our marriage. The counselor listened to me but didn't seem sympathetic to my desire to end things. He asked, "John, why don't you tell me why you won't consider working on your marriage?" I sighed, trying to maintain composure. "Dr. Graham, let me tell you a story. Not fiction, but it might read like a fairy tale. I was at my company's Christmas party when I saw a girl across the room. Ever heard of love at first sight? Well, it was for me. My boss introduced me to his goddaughter, Julia, and from that moment, I knew she was the woman I wanted to spend my life with." I glanced over at Julia. She was no longer the tearful woman she had been earlier. She was smiling, and for a moment, I almost forgot everything that had happened. But I continued. "It was love at first sight for me, Dr. Graham. It wasn't something that grew over time, it was instant. Does that give you any hints as to my psychological makeup? I would think it would. So, if I can fall in love at first sight, then isn't it possible that I can fall out of love just as quickly?" Julia flinched at my words, but I pressed on. "She was on a date with another man. She claims she never slept with him, and I believe her, but I know for a fact she would have if I hadn't stepped in. She cheated on me any way you want to look at it. A date with another man is still cheating. And to make matters worse, the man she was with was Douglas Dog Simon, my worst enemy. You see, she knew how much I hated him, how much he hurt my sister, Barbara, and yet, she chose him." I paused, feeling the weight of everything I was saying. "And then, to top it all off, she went with him to our special place. The place where we met, the place where I asked her to marry me, the place where we had so many good memories. It was the place I envisioned us celebrating the birth of our first child. When I saw her with him, raising their glasses, toasting each other, and smiling, it was like my heart tore open. The love I had for her started leaking out. By the time I reached their table, my heart was already half empty. By the time I walked out of that restaurant, it was dead. There was no more love left for her." I paused, then looked directly at Julia. "So now you see, Dr. Graham, why I don't want to be married to her anymore. There's no love left, and I don't want to be in a marriage when I don't love her anymore. I can't be any clearer than that." By this point, Julia was openly crying. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it didn't change my resolve. I turned to her and said, "Julia, I'm sorry. I don't want to hurt you, But can't you see my point? You wouldn't want to be married to me if I didn't love you. And I don't. Dr. Graham said, "Well, our time's up for today. That's it for today, but I feel like we've covered everything, and I'm confident we can make progress with individual counseling. I really believe that we can reconnect. I'll recommend to the judge that these sessions should continue." At that moment, I was furious. After everything I just said, there's no way I'm attending any more sessions. If you think there's any chance for this marriage to survive, you must be out of your mind. Have your sessions with Julia if you want, but I won't be part of it. I stood up and walked out of the office. I couldn't believe how clueless she was. 2 days later, I received a letter from the court with 3 dates set for my individual counseling sessions. Needless to say, when the first date arrived and I didn't attend, I was escorted to the courthouse. I stood before Judge Caldwell, who ultimately held me in contempt of court. She fined me $500 and told me that if I missed my next session, I'd be jailed. I told her, "You'll have to jail me then because I'm not going to any more sessions." And that's exactly what happened. I skipped the next session, and 2 hours after the scheduled appointment, a police officer knocked on my door. He escorted me to Cook County Jail. What a lovely place, I thought. Yikes. My attorney visited me every day, trying to convince me to attend the counseling, but I refused. On the 3rd day, I had another visitor, my old boss, Greg. He was allowed a 15-minute visit. "John, I'm sorry you're going through this," he said. "I'm also sorry for the way I treated you. I should have seen how things were with you and been more supportive. I think I have a way out of this for you, if you'll just give me a chance to work through it with you. If you agree to the individual counseling, Judge Caldwell will let you out of jail. Then you and I can sit down and discuss what I think will help you resolve your situation. All I ask is that you consider coming back to work for me afterward. No promises, just think about it." For the first time in a long while, I felt good about something. Greg had always been my friend and had treated me fairly before everything with Julia blew up. I agreed to do what he asked and promised to consider going back to work for Grace System Solutions. The judge scheduled my first individual session for the next day. An officer escorted me home, where I showered, shaved, and dressed for the appointment. Then he took me to the session and waited while I attended. The session went exactly as expected. Lots of psychological digging and probing. I did my best to cooperate. When it was over, Dr. Graham escorted me out and told the officer, "Mr. Burton was very cooperative and has agreed to attend the next session, a week from today." The officer replied, "Very well. Mr. Burton, you're free to go home, but let me caution you. If you miss next week's session, you'll be brought before Judge Caldwell again. And trust me, you don't want to be in your shoes then. She's tough when she gets mad, so don't skip that session." I called Greg and agreed to meet him at my apartment the next day. We spent the whole morning discussing his proposed plan. We made all the necessary arrangements to get what we needed, then went to lunch. Afterward, we sat down again to discuss my future involvement with Grace System Solutions. "Greg," I said, "I've always respected you and you've been a good friend, but I need to do what's best for me. You might remember that when I got my last promotion, you told me not to do any programming. You said I was too valuable as a system maintenance manager and customer service relations manager to get involved with programming. The thing is, Greg, I love to write code. So, I've been working on a new security program, 4 generations ahead of anything on the market. Trust me, it would blow your socks off. It would revolutionize system security across the country. You know how much trouble retailers have with hacking? Well, with my program, it will be totally impossible. I'm a couple of months away from testing it on real company data, and I estimate it'll be ready to roll out in 3 or 4 months. Greg nodded. "You've already lined up a test, right?" I smiled. "Greg, I could never pull the wool over your eyes. Yes, I've lined it up. Adam and his team are on board. They're with you because of my personal friendship with Adam. And honestly, if my program works, they'll be leaving you. Greg said, I know you're right, but how do you plan to get around the non-compete clause in your contract? Greg, the non-compete clause only applies if I quit or was fired for cause, I replied. But neither of those apply here. You fired me because I wouldn't try to work out my marriage. Because of that, there's no non-compete issue. Greg gave me a sly smile. Not to be contentious, but I could have always come up with some work-related issues to fall back on. I laughed at him, and he shot me a look, clearly annoyed that I found it funny. Greg, I said, I recorded our conversation when you fired me. I clearly asked if there were any work-related issues responsible for my firing, and you said no. You admitted my firing was all about Julia. I've got you on tape. Why did you feel it was necessary to tape that conversation? He asked. Because Greg, I replied. I know you. I knew how much you loved Julia. And I was pretty sure you'd do everything you could to stop me from divorcing her. Okay, fair enough, he said. I continued, I expect to make a fortune with this new software, and I'm willing to share that with you, under certain conditions. I'll come back to work for you full-time. My duties can stay the same with customer service relations, but I won't go back to the system maintenance side. You'll need to hire a manager to handle that, and that manager should report to me because the new program will be closely tied to the system. If you're on board, I'm confident you'll love it. I paused for a moment. The rest of my time, about 40%, will be spent on program development. Even though I'll be working full-time for you, I'll be paid to develop my program and future programs. The exclusive ownership of these programs will remain mine. In exchange for that, I'll grant you an exclusive license to market them, with a fixed royalty percentage payable to me. I know this sounds bold, Greg, but trust me, once you see what I'm working on, you'll be thrilled with this deal. We're going to make a killing. Greg, ever the businessman, nodded. I agree to all the terms of this proposal. We'll have our corporate attorney contact you to write up the deal. But understand, if I feel it's not working as expected, I still have the option of letting you go. I'd like you to modify the royalty percentage to a higher number in that case. My next scheduled counseling session came and went without me attending. True to his word, an officer knocked on my door and dragged me to the courthouse, this time in cuffs. He smirked. I warned you, buddy. When Judge Caldwell entered the courtroom, I noticed the color in her face was at least 2 or 3 shades of red. Smoke practically seemed to be coming out of her nostrils, and fire shot out of her eyes. Yep, as predicted, she was furious. Well, Mr. Burton, it seems you've done it again, she said. I find you in contempt of court and hereby sentence you to 30 days in jail. Julia was there, though I had no idea why. She suddenly burst out, No, Your Honor, please don't do this to John. I withdraw my objections to his divorce request. Please grant it, and don't send him to jail again. Spit practically flew out of her mouth when Judge Caldwell shot back. It's too late for that, honey. He's spending time in jail, period. At that moment, I jumped up. Your Honor, I'd like to approach the bench. She glared at me and snapped. You are not allowed to address me directly. That's what you have an attorney for. I turned to Jacob, my attorney. Jacob Easterman, you're fired. Then I looked back at the judge. Your Honor, I'll be representing myself, and I wish to approach the bench. I moved forward, and so did Julia's attorney. What is it, Mr. Burton? The judge asked. Your Honor, I began. I'd like to request a short meeting in your chambers to settle this case. I believe that if we have that meeting, everything can be resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Very well, she said. Counselors will meet with me in my chambers in 10 minutes. I declare a short recess. Once we gathered in her office, I requested that the meeting be off the record. She was about to speak, but I quickly added, "Your Honor, I have reason to believe there are issues here that neither you nor Julia's attorney would want on public record." After a long pause, she nodded and instructed the court reporter to leave the room. "Very well, Mr. Burton. It's your show. Let's hear it." I took a deep breath. "First of all, Your Honor, I have no desire for anyone to get hurt further in these proceedings. Please believe me when I say that I have reason to believe there has been judicial impropriety here. I don't want you hurt, and I certainly don't want your marriage destroyed. I don't want to see Julia's parents' marriage destroyed either, and I certainly don't want Julia hurt. I don't love her anymore, and I don't want to be married to her, but I don't want her life to fall apart. As you may have already guessed, I have evidence of you having an affair with Julia's father, which would require you to recuse yourself from this case. The evidence is irrefutable and explicit, I might add. I could present it here to you and opposing counsel, if necessary, but I'd rather not do that. If I'm forced to, I'd submit it to the Judicial Review Board, but I don't want to go down that road. As I said, I don't want anyone hurt further. Julia would be devastated, and I don't know if your two marriages would survive. I just want my divorce." I glanced over at Julia's attorney, hoping for some acknowledgement of my statement. "What do you think?" I asked. He looked at Judge Caldwell before speaking. "Your Honor, I've always respected you for refusing to give up on marriages that still have a chance. You've been tough in some cases, but I've understood why you did it. Assuming Mr. Burton's evidence is legitimate, I'd be disappointed in you for having an affair, and even more so that you didn't recuse yourself from this case. But like him, I wouldn't want you hurt. I believe you should grant him his divorce." Turning back to me, he added, "Mr. Burton, my only request is that you sit down with Julia for just a little while and let her talk to you. I know you told the counselor that your heart is broken, and I understand that, but know that hers is broken too. Just give her a few minutes of your time. None of this needs to leave this room if you grant the divorce." When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Caldwell granted the divorce. The property settlement was also approved as presented. Each of us would keep our investment accounts, our 401(k), and 50% of our savings. The operating expense account would cover all bills until the divorce was finalized and beyond, remaining in Julia's custody. She would keep the condo, living there as long as she wished, but should she sell it, the net proceeds would be split 50/50. The judge reversed her previous ruling of 30 days in jail and instead fined me $500, which I gladly paid. I realized she had to save face in some way, considering the unusual scrutiny this case would likely attract. Nobody wanted that kind of attention. As promised, I sat down with Julia in a private interview room next to the courtroom. She apologized again, explaining that she didn't know why she'd done what she did. She told me she would continue seeing her counselor until she understood why. She said she would always love me and begged for my forgiveness. "I forgive you, Julia," I said, "and I don't hate you. I just don't love you anymore." I hugged her and walked out of the room. As I made my way down the hallway, I could hear her crying. I spent the next 6 weeks working on my new security program, and I was about to implement it on Adam and Ben's system. About a week before I was scheduled to go to Cleveland, I received a call from Julia. "Johnny," she said, "I've decided to sell the condo and I've got an offer for $560,000. I didn't want to sell it to someone else before giving you the chance to buy it. If you want it, you can pay me $280,000, and I'll reject the other offer. What do you think?" First of all, I told her, "I don't want the condo. You can go ahead and sell it. Have my share of the proceeds sent to my attorney, payable to me. You'll handle the paperwork for the sale and make sure the funds get into my account. But why are you selling it? I'm selling it because I'm leaving town, she replied. I have a new job, and I won't be living here anymore. She then told me she'd found out about the affair between her father and the judge, and though I hadn't wanted anyone hurt, it still hurt her when she found out. She said she just needed a fresh start. I wished her all the best in her new job and said my goodbyes. 2 weeks later, I walked into Adam and Greg's company with my security software package, ready for the testing phase and live system implementation. Adam greeted me with a big hug, saying they were excited to get started. John, he said, let me introduce you to our IT administrator. And there stood Julia. I glanced at Adam. What's going on here? I asked. He smiled and replied, Julia is our new IT administrator. I'm sure you know how talented she is, and I'm sure you'll. I was a bit taken aback but replied, I'll need a workstation to work on a few things for the rest of the day. I'll work with Julia some, but mostly I'll be getting the package ready for installation. The computer should have internet access. I managed to calm myself down, and I have to admit, the day was surprisingly pleasant. I had always thought of Julia as witty, intelligent, humorous, beautiful, and fun to be around. None of those attributes had changed. As I said, the day was pleasant. Julia had always been my best friend, as well as my wife, and I found myself missing her in ways I hadn't expected. Throughout the day, it was clear she was doing everything she could to stay close to me, to interact with me, and yes, to subtly touch me. It was having an effect, though I tried not to let it show. I had always considered Julia my best friend, and truthfully, I missed her. At 5:30 p.m., we said our goodbyes with a casual, I'll see you tomorrow, and left. Sitting in my hotel room later that night, I did a lot of thinking and decided to make a bold move. I logged onto my laptop and hacked into the company's computer system. Yes, as you might expect from a programmer, I'd always left a back door in the system, just in case I ever needed access. Anyway, I hacked into the personnel records and found Julia's address. I went to the wine store, bought a bottle of her favorite wine, and drove to her apartment. The doorman asked if she was expecting me, and when I told him no, he called her apartment. When there was no answer, I assumed she might have gone out and wasn't back yet. I asked if it was okay for me to wait, and he led me to a small lounge area off to the side of the lobby. Not long after, I saw Julia walk through the door with a man. As they reached the elevator, he gave her a hug, kissed her, and even patted her on the backside. The doorman walked over to them, said something to Julia, and pointed in my direction. I started walking toward them, and I heard Julia say, "Oh God, no, please no." "Well, here we are again," I said. "I seem to always interrupt your dates." I handed the bottle of wine to the man and said, "You two have a good evening." As I walked out, Julia rushed after me. "Johnny, please don't go. Please don't leave me again," she pleaded. But I left. I returned to my hotel and sent Julia an email at the company. Subject: regarding today. Julia, when I walked into Adam's office today, I was surprised to see you there. It didn't take me long to figure out that you'd probably quit your job, sold the condo, moved to Cleveland, and started working for Ben and Adam just so you could be close to me. I might be arrogant, but I assumed you wanted a chance to reconnect, to see if we could get back together. I imagine Greg had something to do with it, telling you what I was working on and where I would be. That doesn't surprise me, but it doesn't make me happy that he's messing with my life. Honestly, I was happy to see you. I've missed you. After all, we were great friends. I enjoyed being with you today. It felt really good. I didn't want it to end, so I decided to bring over a bottle of wine so we could talk some more, away from the office. I had to take a moment to refocus my thoughts, but I continued, and then my surprise came when I saw you with another man. Kind of confuses me. You go to all the trouble to be close to me again, Yet in the short time you've been in Cleveland, you've already started an intimate relationship with someone else. The only two explanations I can think of are that you either aren't really interested in renewing our relationship, or you still think you can be with me while dating other men. Well, either way, I'm out of the equation. I've been second-guessing myself about divorcing you, but your actions give me peace of mind. I didn't make a mistake. What frustrates me is knowing that I almost became a fool again, believing you cared about me. You care only about yourself. I hope one day you find whatever will make you happy. The only thing left to say is this: don't pursue me again. As far as I'm concerned, I shouldn't exist to you. Have a good life, Julia. Second email regarding the software. On another note regarding the software I'm working on, I'd like to keep you updated on the progress. I'm nearing the testing phase and will be in touch soon about implementing it. I'll let you know when everything is ready for the next steps. Subject: Installation Instructions. Julia. Attached to this email is a file containing complete instructions on how to activate the security software. There is a 2-word password needed to access both the file and the system. I'm going to let you figure out what those 2 words are, but if you think back to the last time we saw each other at Spaga, it should be pretty easy. If you can't remember the 2 words, maybe Adam can help you, as he heard them too. The passwords are broken promises. Those 2 words will always be needed to access the system. I know I was being a bit juvenile, but so be it. Every time you access the system, I want you to be reminded of how you treated our marriage. I've installed the package on the server, and with the instructions, you'll only need to activate it and set second-level access codes and passwords for various users. It's all in the instructions. If you have any issues in the future, call Greg, and he'll put you in touch with the staff that worked with me on the program, because I won't be working there anymore. Good luck. Sometimes, men who've divorced a cheating wife end up with a younger, more beautiful, sexier, smarter, and more intelligent woman. She enjoys sex more, loves him forever, and never cheats. That was Julia before she cheated on our marriage. And then it wasn't. I didn't find that woman. In fact, when I resigned from Grace System Solutions, I fell into a deep depression. Yes, I continued to receive huge royalty payments for the security package licenses Greg continued to market. It was beyond my expectations, but the money didn't matter to me anymore. I was in uncharted territory. My self-esteem hit rock bottom. I had lost all confidence in myself. A first for me, as I'd always been self-assured. I knew I had a problem, so I took action and started seeing a counselor. After a few sessions, I began to come around. I continued with the counseling, not with Dr. Graham, but it was still a step in the right direction. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious. With the money coming in, my life improved, and I decided to go with the flow for a while before I ever fell in love again. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.